You're listening to the 40 Thrive Podcast, the show created for women 40 and beyond, ready to shake things up. And now, your host, Jackie McDougall.
Hey, welcome back to another episode of the 40 Thrive Podcast. If this is your first time here, welcome. The 40 Thrive Podcast was created to help you make midlife your best life, connecting you with experts and other women over 40 who are making things happen. This podcast is meant to not only inspire you, but provide you the tools and resources you need to kick butt in your life. This week's guest is author of The Naked Truth, Leslie Morgan. If you're looking for a summer read that's got grit, a point of view, and gets a wee bit, a lot racy, this book is for you. In The Naked Truth, Leslie shares her story of finding herself and a whole lot of men after ending a 20-year marriage. But our conversation today is about so much more than sex. Leslie shares what was happening in her marriage that I think a lot of women can relate to and how she felt stuck, just shy of turning 50. While the answer for her might not be the same for you, I think there are so many thought-provoking nuggets in this interview. To get Leslie's new book, The Naked Truth, head on over to the show notes at 40thrive.com/episode 27. But for those of you who love a good audiobook like I do, you can get The Naked Truth for free at audibletrial.com/40thrive. Audible is the world's largest seller and producer of audiobooks and other spoken word entertainment, enriching the lives of millions of listeners every day. They're offering 40 Thrive podcast listeners a free month plus one free audiobook download just for trying them out. So head on over to audibletrial.com/40thrive. Okay, so Leslie Morgan is an author, consultant, and thought leader on women's leadership, work-life balance, inspirational parenting, overcoming adversity, and surviving violence against women. She lives in D.C., and her corporate experience includes the Washington Post, Johnson & Johnson, Leo Burnett, and 17 Magazine. I really enjoyed talking to Leslie on the podcast, and this episode is the last one I recorded with a massive cold, so thanks for bearing with me over the last few episodes. All right, without further ado, Leslie Morgan, welcome to the 40 Thrive Podcast.
Pleasure to be here.
I have to say that I like to read the book and be educated before I have a conversation. And I was with my husband, and so we're like, hey, let's just listen to it together. And you, I should pay you because it was sort of like going to therapy. There were so many talking points between what was going on in your marriage to what was going on after to spicing up your sex life. Thank you for that.
That is a pleasure. And you're not the only one. Lots of other really happily married women have said that The Naked Truth has really helped them too, in ways that shocked them and frankly surprised me too.
You were describing things that were happening in your marriage. But before we get into this, I do want to go back to your last book, Crazy Love.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Because you have been doing such important work. You're an advocate for domestic violence. Tell me a little bit about the reaction of that book.
So Crazy Love was published 10 years ago, and it's a memoir of my abusive first marriage. And I want to draw a really clear line between my first marriage and my second marriage, because even though I was unhappy in both of them, the first one was the one that almost killed me. And the second one was just run-of-the-mill unhappiness. But when I was 22 and working at 17 Magazine in New York City, I met this marvelous man on the New York City subway. He was a little bit older, the smartest, funniest guy I'd ever met. He was a Wall Street investment banker. And I fell in love with him really fast, and I married him. And it turned out that he had been terribly physically abused as a little boy. And he brought that abuse into our marriage. And he first attacked me 5 days before our wedding. He strangled me. And I married him anyway because I didn't know anything about abuse, and I thought he would never do it again. And then he beat me twice more on our honeymoon. And it just got worse and worse and worse, as domestic violence always does. He got guns. He beat me all the time. He was destroying me in every way, and he was going to kill me. And I was with him for 4 years, and I loved him the whole time. And I finally left him because there was one beating where he came within really seconds of killing me. He strangled me many times, and he beat me very badly. And I realized I had to choose myself over him, even though I still really loved him and felt sorry for him and how terribly he'd been treated as a little boy. So that's Crazy Love. And I did a TED Talk also on why victims stay, because it's so misunderstood.
Right. I saw that. It was a very powerful TED Talk.
Well, thank you. It was really both the book and the TED Talk mattered so much to me because I needed to explain to people why it happens. And it happens to so many women and men in every community, every religion, every education level, every profession, every neighborhood. And I just felt like, and I still feel that we need a lot more openness about emotional and physical abuse. It's the only way that we're going to end it because abuse thrives only in silence and we have to talk about it. And it's very powerful to talk about it and to read about it and to learn about it.
I know so many people who are like, well, why wouldn't you just leave? And so I think what you're doing is really important work to shed light on. It's not that simple to just like
It's
get up and
never
walk
that
away.
simple. No. And also, I left many times. The average domestic violence victim leaves 7 times before she really leaves because we always go back because they're very compelling. We love them. We feel sorry for them. And I think the biggest message of Crazy Love in my TED Talk is that strong, smart, independent women get in abusive relationships all the time. It has nothing to do with self-esteem or a lack of education, or it's not that we want it. It's a carefully laid, very seductive physical, financial, and psychological trap that's disguised as love, and anybody can fall for it.
Right.
And it's really hard to get out of it once you're in it.
Well, and what's interesting to me is that you talk about that relationship in Crazy Love, and it's so obvious for people to go, oh, that is abusive. That is wrong. That is something you should leave. And then you're in this relationship with your second husband for 20 years, and he's described as kind and gentle. But there can be abuse, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but there can be abuse in many forms, and it's not nearly as obvious. And so can you talk about this book and how you talk about your marriage and getting out of that?
Well, what happened was that I met my second husband a few years after I ended my first marriage. And all I wanted was a stable, steady, nice guy to marry and to have children with. And that's what my second husband was. And I think a lot of women in their late 20s or early 30s, we kind of set the bar too low because we think that we need a good provider, and we're so, the biological clock is ticking. And
Right.
I really wanted to have kids. And so in some ways, I did both of us a disservice by marrying him, because he was never going to make me happy over time. And frankly, I was never going to make him happy over time either. And we were happy for a couple of years. And then just life and having kids and managing 2 careers and everything else started just, as it does, like drip, 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 killing the love and respect we had for each other. And we didn't know how to stay together. And we just gradually grew apart. And we also changed. My ex-husband got incredibly into his work and to making money. And he was an only child. He didn't know how to be an involved dad. And we had 3 kids really quickly, which is what I wanted to do because I come from a large, crazy, chaotic family. And I wanted to have that kind of family. And, it was like, I think it's a very common story of how you follow a marriage that started out with a lot of promise gradually falls apart. And I think one of the biggest mistakes that I made is that I didn't stand up for myself enough in the second marriage. It was similar to the first marriage, although the degree of the difficulty was extremely different. I just swallowed my resentment when my ex wasn't doing enough at home and wasn't involved enough with the kids and wasn't, prioritizing me enough. And it got to us over time. And I got really angry, which I think is a normal response. But unfortunately, my anger and frustration with him pushed him away even further. And he started spending more and more time at the office and not with me and not with our family. And it's pretty predictable what happened. And by the time we went to couples therapy, it was really too late.
Right.
So there was no way that he was abusing me. It wasn't that. It was more that we fell into stereotypical male and female roles. And that is what killed us. And I think that that's a really important message for women too, is that I realized when he and I split up after 20 years together, that not only had I lost the marriage, but I'd lost myself too. By throwing myself into being the perfect mom and the perfect wife and just everything our society says we should do is just give everything to the relationships in your life. And I forgot about me. And that's the big message of the naked truth, is that I had to go out there and rediscover myself, because I'd lost myself. And I wish women like you and others who are happily married knew not to lose themselves, and also that the men in our lives knew how to nurture women, because we don't teach that to American men. American men in general see relationships as meeting their needs and stroking their ego and making their life nice. And they're not ever taught how to care for women, except for a few of them. And I think that's something really wrong in our society. And that's one of the things that the Naked Truth tries to address too. And maybe that's why your husband, sparked to it so much.
That's really such an interesting point that I hadn't even considered. But you said something in the book that ding, there are certain things that you would say that I'm like, oh my gosh. And I was driving. I'm like, I have to write this down because we were listening to it on audiobook, which, by the way, you did a great job reading.
Thank you so much. It was such an honor to do that.
Because, sometimes you either hire out or maybe sometimes you hear an author and you're like, maybe they should have hired out. But I really feel like, oh, she's telling me her story. It feels really authentic and genuine. So we're listening to it. And one of the things you said was marriage really is to benefit a man,
Right.
Marriage is designed in a way and I thought about that and I thought, well, why did I want to get married? I adore my husband, 17 years this year. It's all good, but you're absolutely right when it comes to the lion's share of the work and the control of the finances and all these things that I'm doing and I'm doing and I'm doing. And he's doing his own stuff, but let's just say if I weren't married, I probably wouldn't get married again.
Right. I know. And you know what? It's so funny. I think a lot of women feel that way. A friend of mine just said to me, she said, I don't want to divorce him, but I wouldn't mind being a widow, and then she said the same thing, that she wouldn't get married again.
Yeah.
Because as my friend KC said to me, marriage is a sucky institution for women. Not always, but a lot of the time it is. Yeah, because we're expected to overcompromise our careers, our physical health, our sleep, our nutrition, everything. It's just the deck is stacked in favor of men. And we women are so good at giving that we overgive, and nobody is telling us not to. And so in the Naked Truth, I try to say, wait, don't lose yourself in marriage. Even if you love your husband and he's good to you and he's good to your kids, don't lose yourself, because you're really precious. And he married you, so you've got to keep yourself alive. And over the years, I saw so many things that just stunned me about how much women were giving up. And one of the things that really scared me was I have a lot of dermatology issues. So I spent a lot of time in dermatologist offices, and there were a lot of old people there, and it was all old men being brought in by their wives, and then women alone. And there wasn't a single man taking care of a woman. And I just thought, God, this is my future, and this is terrible. If I'm going to take care of somebody as well as I'm taking care of my husband, I sure want him taking care of me too. And he wasn't, and he couldn't, and he hadn't been raised to do that. And that's, fundamentally why we ended up splitting up. And I ended up realizing that, I needed to find myself again and to heal. I needed men, and I needed a lot of them. And it was such a funny thing for me as a feminist to realize, is that the way back to myself for me, not for everybody, but definitely for me, was through other men, and a lot of them. And, in my case, the magic number was 5. For other people, it could be 1 or 20 or whatever. But that's what the story that I tell in the Naked Truth. And it even now, it shocks me as much as it shocks everybody else that is what happened to me after I got divorced at age 50.
Right. It's so interesting because you talk about being invisible. You're absolutely right. First of all, that we wear this martyr life as a badge of honor. Look at how much I am sacrificing for everyone. I am so valuable. I'm taking care of kids. I'm taking care of a house. And it's we wear this badge of honor of invisibility. And then
I know, it's so
it
true.
took you to get this divorce and to rediscover yourself through these men to become visible.
It's really true. It's true. And you hear a lot in the media. There have been a lot of articles lately about women embracing their invisibility after age 50 and what a relief it is to not care about men. And I get that, but I think that no one actually wants to be invisible. And that what a lot of women are saying is that if the choice is being ridiculed for being older and not conforming to a Sports Illustrated idea of femininity, that they'd rather be invisible. But I very much felt like I want to be recognized and valued at any age for being female and being beautiful, even if I'm wrinkled, which I very much am. And, you know, I also, there's so many joys of growing older. I'm so much more comfortable in my skin than I ever was. And, you know, there's also data that women enjoy sex more as they get older and have more intense orgasms. And how can we walk away from that? And why does our society say we must walk away from that? In order to be happy or to stay married, to squelch that part of ourselves. I discovered some really horrifying statistics about women and sex. And the two quick ones are that women in their 50s, 30% of them, married and unmarried, have not had sex in the last year. 30%.
30%.
And then what you get to be in your 60s, 50% of women have not had sex in the last year. And it's just craziness. And I think it's our society is devaluing women, and that it's a loss for everybody, including men.
Somewhere along the lines, you know, when we have kids and we have all that going on, it becomes just another thing on our to-do list.
I know. Isn't that awful?
And
it's so true.
It is absolutely true. And now my youngest now is 12. And I have said to my husband multiple times, because it takes a while to reprogram, like, you are no longer something on my to-do list. Like, I'm in this, you know, we're in this. It's not, you don't have to convince me. There was a period of time where it was a lot more like, oh God, you too? Like, why does everyone
it's like
want
somebody
something?
else wanting something from me physically.
Exactly.
You know, like, yeah, I mean, the sexiest thing that could be said to me at that age that you have just come out of is, I'll let you sleep in, you know, like that was the sex, or I'll unload the dishwasher.
Right.
And I thank God you didn't lose yourself or the relationship, and you've rediscovered that bond. That's the sign of a happy marriage, I think. And I think that it's wonderful that you're doing that. And I think there are so many women who don't know to do that. And also their husbands have gotten so much gratification outside of the marriage. And I'm not talking about infidelity, but just from their work or golf or a sports car or whatever else they have, that the men have stopped looking to the marriage and relationship too. That's a very lonely place for both the men and the women to be in.
It's a slippery slope. I mean, it
right. True.
It can happen quickly. It just goes way too far, way too fast. Before we get into these guys, do you think it takes divorce to become visible? Do you think that women who've been married a long time, like myself and many of my other listeners, like, can they find themselves? Can they become more visible without having to blow up their lives?
Yes, of course they can, and they should. But you have to have a thick skin, because you're going to face some societal shade from it. I'll never forget, there was one woman in my social circle who, even though she had 3 kids, like it seemed like all of us did, she still wore high heels and makeup, and she looked gorgeous. She happened to be Italian. And she was famous among the men and women in our circle that she had never kind of like become invisible. We sort of loved her. The men really loved her. But she got a pass because she was from another country. If she had been one of our peer group, other women in particular would have been really suspicious of her. Like, why does she care so much? Why is she wearing lipstick to the soccer game? So you've got to be ready to explain that to your family, to your friends, to your group, and most importantly to yourself, that you're valuable enough that you're going to make yourself feel good. And also, I don't want to say that it's all about how you look on the outside, because that it isn't. This is an inside job, and making sure you still feel good on the inside. For me, I felt good on the inside when I looked good on the outside, but not everybody is like that. So yes, you can still stay married and find yourself again. Absolutely. But it does take some conscious effort and self-examination and conversations with your girlfriends and your significant other, and a therapist or a support group or whatever. It takes some work, because our society doesn't want you to do that. Our society wants you to stay invisible and kind of a drudge to marriage and motherhood.
Yeah. Why do you think society's so fearful of powerful women who look damn good?
That's a really good question. I think you look at more extreme societies where they make women cover up themselves physically. And the answer is that a beautiful woman who knows her power and is smart to boot and empowered. I think that some people, unfortunately, are afraid of that. I'm not afraid of it. I think it's good for everybody, but there are a lot of elements in our society, and really every society, that says that an independent woman is dangerous.
Yeah. And I see a lot of women who are in marriages much like yours, where you'd get like the jabs and the comments. And I think you realized in some way, shape, or form along the way that you may have been the recipient of those comments, but you never held them as real to you.
I didn't. And I don't know what it was about me. I think I had enough self-esteem, maybe from leaving my first marriage, that when it got really bad and I realized that part of what was going on is that my ex-husband wanted me to feel invisible and horrible about myself, especially sexually, that I was able to say, wait a minute, this is not what love is. This is not love. And also because I'm so immersed in the domestic violence community, even though he wasn't abusing me, I was able to say that that's not love and that's not what I wanted, and that I deserved better. Maybe I could find better out there with other men. But really what I thought fundamentally when I decided to end the marriage was that I'd much rather be on my own than making compromises and sacrificing for somebody who not only didn't love me, but who really didn't even like me very much.
Yeah, that's the vibe I got from the book, is he just didn't seem to like himself all that much. And that he didn't like anybody around him. I don't know.
I don't know. And I don't want to judge him, because I have to recognize that I was not a great wife to him either for a lot of it. And he's really happily remarried now, and he's a great dad to my kids. And what I would say is that we are a mismatch, because I'm a much more passionate person than he is, and he's not very passionate about really anything. And in my view, and so we were just not a good match in that way. And we were never going to make each other happy. So I wish him the best. I think he is really happy now, but I've never looked back, which is a sign to me that it was right to end the marriage, as
Absolutely.
sad and awful as it is to do that. Right.
For the kids as well.
Right.
So let's talk about the first of the 5 men. So you are in an airport. You're just, dropping your kid off at camp, and you dump a coffee on a guy. Like, that is already like a romantic comedy type of meeting. But then he goes away and you track his ass down.
Right. So I feel like this is one of the finest achievements of my life, is that I tracked that man down. So I had never asked a man out. I didn't know that if you meet a guy who you find attractive, you have to get their name. Like, I didn't know any of the fundamentals of dating, things that men have known since they were 15 years old. So I met this gorgeous, lovely man in an airport, totally coincidentally. And there was a spark between us. He was handsome, and he woke something up in me very quickly. We got on the same flight, and I was praying that he'd be waiting for me afterwards, and he wasn't. And I got sort of mad at myself and at life. And I thought, I'm going to find him. And I did find him. And he responded to me. And then I don't know how long it was. We started talking on the phone every day and really getting to know each other. And then we had this ridiculously exciting, to me, tryst. The first time I'd ever met a man in a hotel room with the express purpose of having sex. I hadn't been naked in front of anybody but my husband in over 20 years. And this lovely man was 20 years younger than I was, and he was perfect. And I had no idea what was going to happen. And one of the funniest things about it is that the sex itself wasn't great, because we were strangers, and I was really nervous, and I think he was nervous too. And it just didn't make any difference, because I was in bed with a 29-year-old, and for the first time in forever, I felt beautiful and valuable. And it was like I discovered this whole new part of myself. And it was really quite extraordinary. And that first tryst, it changed me forever. And then the unfortunate, heartbreaking thing to me is that after a little while, he decided he couldn't see me anymore. And that really got my attention too. And that's when I, called my girlfriend Casey, and we plotted my future in Starbucks, of course, where all important conversations between women happen. And I told her I needed 5 men like that. And thank God she was gutsy enough that she didn't shame me about it or say that it was ridiculous or absurd. It was a ridiculous thing to come up with. But she just said, okay, go do it. You deserve it. And she became my coach. And I went out and did it. And it doesn't happen right away. It was hard. You don't just wait up one day at 50 and say, I'm going to have 5 gorgeous boyfriends overnight. There were times where I had 1, where I had 6, where I had 0. But overall, it worked. And I was amazed at how many great men there are out there, and how difficult it was to meet them, but how much fun it was. And that men can be healers as well as destroyers. And that's what I found. And that's the fundamentally who I am as a woman is that I love men, and I think they're very powerful and important in my life. And none of those 5 boyfriends turned into my soulmate. I never thought they were going to be, but they all gave me back a piece of myself. And I'm really grateful to every single one of them.
What do you think you most learned about yourself by going through this experience?
I learned so many things about who I really am. In some ways, it was a journey back to who I was kind of as a little kid. That I'm kind of goofy, that I fundamentally like myself, and that I like boys. I always liked boys a lot, and I still do. But I think that one of the most concrete things that those men showed me is that even at my advanced age, with my wrinkles and my saggy boobs and my cellulite, that men see me in a very different way than I see myself. And that's what I want to say to women out there. There's a scene at the end of the first third of The Naked Truth where I'm doing yoga in front of a hotel mirror naked because I forgot my clothes. And I tried so hard to look at myself the way Dylan, that first man, saw me. You know, he just thought my body was beautiful. And I promise you it's not. But I tried to say, okay, look at the positive things. Look at the way Dylan looked at you, Leslie. And I was able to do it. And instead of zooming in on my flaws and the cellulite and the this and that, the way that most women look at ourselves naked, I tried to look at myself through Dylan's eyes. And that's what I try to do every time I look in the mirror now. And it's what I encourage my female friends to do, and the readers of The Naked Truth, and my own daughters. Like, look at the positive things. It's what men do when they look in the mirror. And there's a lot to be learned from them, as much as the feminist in me doesn't like to admit this. And that's one of them, is to look at yourself like a positive lens instead of a really critical negative lens.
I love that you were mentioning that in the book, that, you know, men look in the mirror and they actually see themselves looking better than they actually are.
They do. They puff up. Watch a man look in the mirror. They puff up their chests and they suck in their guts and they're like, wow, I still got it. I look really good. And we women, we're like, oh, look at that cellulite. Look at that. And it's things that other people don't even see. And it's just a way to beat ourselves up. One of the blessings of getting older is that there's no way that you're going to look perfect to yourself or to anybody else. And so I think there's a possibility that we can be much more accepting of ourselves and value the good things about our bodies.
I just think that we're so critical of ourselves. And in actuality, if we saw someone else who looked just like us, we'd be like, oh, she's pretty. Or how many times have you seen that woman who isn't typically beautiful? Maybe has a few extra pounds, or she's older, or whatever it is. And you can't stop looking at her because she has this confidence.
That's exactly what it is. That's what I mean by the inside job, that it's on what goes on the inside. And when I'm feeling really good about myself, when I walk down the street or in an airport or wherever I am, I think that I like emit some kind of, radar, because men just stop and look. I think this applies to people, whatever gender you are, whatever your sexual preference is. For me, it's heterosexuality. But I think that you can feel that in a woman when she feels really confident. And I have some props to get there. Like, I love lipstick and short skirts and high heels, but everybody's got their prop. And sometimes it's just having a nice little pep talk with yourself. But if you can walk out your door every day feeling good about yourself, fabulous things happen. And the other thing that I say in the Naked Truth, which is so true, that I learned early on, is that friendliness, being friendly and smiling at everybody is really, really important. You meet a lot of great men that way, but you also meet great women and children and, everybody responds to a smile. And I think it's something that we have completely forgotten in this country, especially with how much time we spend on our phones and all of that. We forget to just look at people and be friendly and smile.
That's such a good point, because, one of the things that you were doing, in addition to getting your groove on, is that you were connecting with human beings outside in the real world. It's a crazy concept, but to be able to go out and to meet people, not to have to drill down, like, do we have the same beliefs? Do we have the same political leanings? But just actually speaking to people. Imagine that.
It's true. And, I did no online dating. It has its place, but I just couldn't do it. And I was so freed from looking for a mate that I was able to cast a really wide net and just kind of chat up any man that caught my eye. And there were so many of them. There still are so many of them every single day that catch my eye. And that's one of my message to people, is that there are men everywhere. There are potential partners everywhere you go. they're already there. You just have to see them in a way that you've never seen them before and take off your blinders.
Totally. I remember one time I was driving down the street with my kids and I told them, for the next 3 blocks, I want you to count how many white cars there are. And they did, and they all had their number. And then we got 3 blocks away and I said, okay, how many red cars did you see? And they said, well, we weren't looking for red cars. I go, exactly.
Right.
And there were several. There were actually 7.
Right.
I counted them. And so I just want you to understand that you're going to find what you look for.
I know. It's so true.
Because I know a lot of single friends that I have who are like, there are no men out there, but there are, and they're everywhere.
Everywhere.
Because you're finding
absolutely
them.
Everywhere. Right. I'm finding them. And the funniest thing to me is when I talk to, like a gorgeous 25-year-old, and every 25-year-old woman is gorgeous in my eyes, because just youth is so beautiful. And she'll say, oh, there are no men out there. And I just want to laugh. I'm like, honey, if I'm finding men, let me just spend 10 minutes with you and just point out all the great men who are there for you.
Right.
But you have to do some work. Every single man who I dated, I asked out, I tracked down, I encouraged to go out with me. You cannot wait for the men to come to you. They just are not going to. You can't wait for love to come to you. If you want it, you have to go get it yourself.
Do you think that men are a little afraid right now because we are finally stepping into our power? We're not putting up with a lot of the bullshit that we used to accept.
I would say that because of the Me Too movement, men are finally treating women with the respect that we deserve, and not assuming that we want to be touched, or we want to be catcalled, or that we want to be asked out, or that we want to be flirted with. That it's not just a man's right to do that whenever he sees an attractive woman. And it's not my right to do that to a man either. That we have to be really respectful and feel people out figuratively to see if they're interested. So I think that men are learning respect, and men are, in general in our society, are learning to be more sensitive, and it's long overdue. And I say, thank God for it.
Right.
So I don't see men as being afraid. I see them as finally learning to be more sensitive to the cues that women give out.
So this all was happening when you were 49 years old. Now,
yes.
Flash forward, you're 53.
Yes.
Are you still into those younger guys? Like, what's happening now?
By coincidence, not by design, every single guy who I date in the naked truth was younger, and 2 of them were 20 years younger. And right now, I'm in a different place. I am not in a committed monogamous relationship right now. I have a small coterie of wonderful men in my life who make me feel sexual and valued and really feminine. And it's a nice place to be. But I think I'm open to a serious relationship for the first time in a long time, because as much fun as the younger guys were and the sort of non-commitment relationships have been, there is something missing. There's a true intimacy and a deep trust that I think you get only in a committed monogamous relationship. So I'm really open to that in a way that I never have been before. But I think what's most interesting is that everybody asks me this question, and the way they say it is, so are you still single? And it's such a revealing question, because what they're really saying is the only legitimate happy ending for a woman in America is to get married and to live happily ever after with a man. Huh. That is really what that question is saying. And I just want to say I am joyfully, happily single. We've got to get rid of those fairy tales. There is no Prince Charming coming for me or you or anybody else. And that mythology is unfair. It's destructive to women, frankly, but it's not good for men either, because it puts a lot of pressure on men to be Prince Charming and to not be who they are. And if you want to be happy, you've got to be your own fairy godmother. I'm happy on my own, and I know many, many, many women and men who are too. And it's a wonderful position to be in, to want a man and want a partner, but to not need it. And it allows me to take things really slowly and to be really selective. And I think in order to be in this position, you have to do a lot of work on yourself. You have to work on your own self-esteem as a woman. But there's also something really nuts and bolts that we haven't talked about at all, but that my work reflects too, my domestic violence work and my mommy wars work, which is that women have got to safeguard their economic independence. Because if you are in your 50s and you went through a terrible divorce and you have no money, you don't have a lot of choices. You've got to find a man to get married to. That's a terrible position to be in your 50s and to feel invisible in so many ways. And then also to feel like the best I can do is go get a retail job that doesn't even pay a living wage. That's horrible. So my message to women is take care of yourself in every single way, economically, financially, physically, in terms of your self-esteem and your value. And the other thing, which is a lot of the story of the naked truth, is how important other women are to us.
Oh,
I could not have
absolutely.
done anything in my life, marriage, motherhood, divorce, dating, without the amazing women. And that's actually the true romance of my life, is
Hmm.
the female friends who've known me for 30 years, who've known me and loved me and taken my 3 a.m. hysterical calls, thank goodness for all of them. Women are really, really an important part of my story. And I think of pretty much every happy woman's story.
100%. Those people who are like, oh, I married my best friend. Like, don't get me wrong. My husband is my person. He's always first
Right.
and foremost, but I did not
Right.
marry my best friend because I want to honor these women, right? In
I
my
know, me
life
too.
who
Right.
show up and stand up for me and listen to my
Right.
crap and vice versa.
I
That he
know.
doesn't get to have that title too.
Right.
They get that
I know.
title.
It's really, more power to you. I hear you. Absolutely.
I love my girls. There are just people in my life who know everything and they love me anyway and I love them anyway. And it's just there's nothing more powerful in my opinion than the love of a girlfriend.
I agree. And you can never have too many. And I always say to my daughters and to my son that you just can't have enough really great friends like that. And you should just collect them and treat them right and save them forever.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, how do your kids feel about the book? Have they read it at all?
So, what I would say to that is that there is no kid on the planet who wants their mom to write a book about her sex life. Um, and my kids are been very clear that this book is hard for them.
Mm.
Um, and so we have had a lot of conversations about the book as I was writing it and now that it's published. And they've been pretty painful conversations. But I love them. They love me. They know that this is what I do as a person, is that I write memoirs about what it means to be a woman making her way in the world. And that the only way for me to write is to be really candid. So their baseline is that they know that about me. And I think that they love that about me and are proud of me, but there's no denying that this has been hard. And I think something that also is very interesting about that issue is that every job that I've had and every book that I've written, people have asked me, how is that affecting your kids and how is it affecting your husband or partner?
Mm.
And I don't think men get asked that question, whether they're writers or businessmen. They don't get asked, well, what do your kids think of your work? How has that impacted them? And it's another subtle way that women are encouraged to overcompromise and lose themselves. I mean, the idea that's inherent to, well, what do your kids think of the book is kind of, maybe I shouldn't have written this. And there are women who've said to me that I shouldn't have written this, that it's not fair to my kids. There are times where my kids would agree. So what am I supposed to do? Like postpone this book forever?
Yeah.
People told me I shouldn't publish Crazy Love for the same reason. And I think there's a subtle gender bias in that says women should always put relationships first, and creativity and their careers and their economic independence and our souls. We should put that second. And the thing I'm most proud of in The Naked Truth is that it was a time where I didn't do that. And I trusted that the people in my life would love me enough that they would still love me, even if I put my writing in this book first. And my fingers are crossed that is the what is happening right now as we speak.
They're young adults now.
They are, yes.
In 20 years from now, they'll all have their own experiences. And I think
Right.
that there could be some respect and appreciation for you finding out who you are while they could still benefit as well.
Right. I think so too. But you know what? It's like one of the lessons of motherhood as your kids grow up is that it's their life, not yours. And I don't have any control over the lessons that they learn from my life or my writing. I hope that they see that. But they might see something totally different, and that's okay too. And I sort of joke to them. I say, you know what? If you ever want to be a writer, I've given you really good material by being your mom,
Yeah.
because there's a lot to dig into from being the child of a strong, smart, independent woman. It's not, I think it's wonderful. And I had a mom like this too. And I wouldn't trade her for anybody, but there are times where it is, you're breaking eggs, and You're making a beautiful omelet, but you are breaking some eggs along the way.
I don't think it's smooth sailing for sure when you're raised by a strong, smart, independent woman.
Right.
I think
It's true.
there's a lot there. Trust me. I get that. You talk about your mom in the book, and you said something. I wish I could quote you specifically, but you said something at the beginning of the book where everything that you do, especially in sex, all stems from your mom. And
It's so
I
true.
guffawed. I laughed, and my husband laughed. And, it's funny because we were driving in the car with the kids. I had one set of earbuds. So I had one earbud in the passenger seat in my ear, and then he had one earbud in. And so I'm like
That
leaning.
is so funny.
I'm like leaning over
it's like an episode from Modern Family.
Yeah,
like
totally.
That is what our life is.
Well,
like,
because
right?
we started the book and the kids were in the car and we're like, oh yeah, quickly we put the earbuds in because this is no. But I was like leaning over the console so that way I would be close enough to him in the car. And so the kids would just hear us like, oh my gosh, or like, exclaim something. They're like, is everything okay? Like, oh yeah, it's fine. It's fine. So, but can you talk a little bit about that? Like how everything stems from the mom?
Okay, so that is my first book was called Mommy Wars, which is about working and stay-at-home mom.
Yes.
A collection of 26 essays, an incredible experience for me to have, and I think personally a wonderful, wonderful book. But I didn't ask the moms to write about their own moms. I gave them a list of questions to cover in their essays, but every single woman in Mommy Wars started the essay by writing about her own mother.
Oh,
and it was
wow.
a real aha moment for me that moms imprint on us just in good ways and bad ways. And my mother, who died 10 years ago, was that way. Everything that I do in my life is linked to her. And even though she's dead, I still talk to her every single day because she's such a huge part of me. And in terms of sex, some of the funnier parts I think of The Naked Truth are the interactions between me and my mom when I like innocently asked her about sex when I was a kid.
Totally.
I asked her what a blowjob was, and she was appalled and disgusted.
It's only prostitutes do that.
Right. And she told me that it was drinking a boy's pee. Yeah. And I thought that for years, and I also, I hope you don't have to mute this, but because my mom couldn't talk to me about my own body, I didn't know. I thought there was a little hole for pee and a bigger hole for poop. And I didn't know there was anything else until my best friend from New York City told me about it. And
it's always the one from New York City,
I know. Thank heavens for her. But so my mom loved being a woman and she was really feminine, but she was really uptight sexually. And you learn how you want to be from your mom and you learn how you don't want to be. And that was one of the things I vowed I wasn't going to be. I wasn't going to be a woman who didn't enjoy her sexuality because I saw what my mom was missing. And I knew what she was missing somehow. So she taught me in that way too. And I think that if she were still alive and she could read The Naked Truth, she would be slightly appalled by it. But she'd be really proud of me as well. And that's a great feeling.
Well, you're coming into your own, like what a great time to be alive for you.
It's so true.
And for
it's so
all
true.
of us, obviously,
yeah.
I'm a big believer in life over 40, whether you're, hooked up with somebody else or not. Like this is a great time to discover, what was it? Runaway Bride with Julia Roberts, where she didn't know what she liked and she had to eat all the different eggs because she used to just eat her eggs in the style of whatever the man wanted. And then finally eating a bunch of different eggs, prepared different ways because she wanted to discover how she actually liked it.
Right.
And I think that's kind of where we are right now is we're all trying to figure out like, how do I want my eggs?
Right. And for me, it was like, how do I want my men, Right. And I had to go and find it. I think that aging while female is challenging, but wonderful if you believe in yourself. And just being a woman of any age I think it's important to say, to hell with all that. Forget about every societal rule that you've heard or what your own mother taught you about dating and sexuality, and just go chart your own course. And I think men have a much easier time doing that in some ways than women do. And it's another thing that we could really learn from men. I love being female. I've always loved being female. And that too started with my mom because my mom really loved that too. She loved being a woman and I could sense that. And I think it's a great message to try to pass on to your sons and daughters, just the joy and value of being female.
So you've always called yourself, a feminist. It's in your bio and all of that. And then in the book, you sometimes go, oh, is this feminism or is that anti-feminism? So what do you think feminism at this point with all of your experience, what does it mean to you now?
I think it's rejoicing in being female and living your life for yourself. And I don't mean that in a selfish or narcissistic way, but just saying, this is my one life that I get in this incarnation, and I'm going to live it that, God or whatever divinity you believe in or don't believe in wants me to be happy and wants me to go out and get the most that I can out of life. And, there were several times in my journey where I caught myself, when I started wearing lipstick every day, even inside the house, I was like, was that feminist? And I was like, that is, because I'm feeling good about myself. Or when I realized that I liked it when construction workers hooted at me, something that I'd hated when I was a teenager that I now liked, to just come to peace with that and to feel good about it. That kind of self-acceptance, I think, is the core of being a feminist.
Feeling the way you feel on your own terms.
Yes,
really.
Exactly. You're saying it better than I. Right.
And so
right.
Sometimes I think we beat ourselves up when we want to be pretty or we want to be attractive to a man, that it's anti-feminism, but that's owning ourselves. It's
right.
owning our own
Yes.
thoughts and feelings and bodies and
right.
all of it. So if you could go back, would you do it all over again?
Absolutely. God. I would do it all over again. If I could wave a magic wand, I would spare my kids the pain of the divorce and the pain that they have suffered in having a mom who's so public about her journey and her sexuality. But that is just not realistic. So yes, I would do it all over again. And one of the wonderful things about the book being published is that it gave me an excuse to call all of those quote unquote boyfriends and just give them a heads up that it was coming out and to reconnect with them. And I had long, wonderful conversations with them. And it made me realize yet again how much I appreciated them. And they also, every one of them told me how much they appreciated me too. And that was so nice to hear. So yeah, I would do it all over again. And, I kind of am doing it all over again because, I'm still dating a lot now. I have these great men in my life, and I'm working on the sequel because men keep giving me unbelievable material and the journey of being female and growing older continues. Sometimes it's really funny and sometimes it's really poignant. And I continue to believe that there are great men out there and that there's just wonderful, as you said, wonderful connection between human beings. And that is, I think as we get older, that's what we realize is the most precious thing in life. It's a cliche, but it's really true. And I'm getting that every single day and writing about it because that's what I do.
So before we go, Leslie, I ask all of my guests, what does it mean to you to 40 Thrive?
I'm going to pick up on something that you said earlier, that when you look at women and try to look at yourself as other people see you, that you see a woman at 30, 40, 50, 60, you see a lot of beauty there that you can't necessarily see in yourself. And to me, to 40 Thrive means to see the beauty in yourself. No matter where you are in life and no matter exactly what you look like, to just, I don't know, I write, the mermaid plays a big metaphor in The Naked Truth, and that we're all mermaids, we're all goddesses. And to try to see ourselves and other women in that way, that's what it means to me to 40 Thrive.
I love it. I love it. I think that what the book has done for me is not only given me material to discuss with my husband, which is always helpful because you go through the motions. There are so many conversation topic points for us. But also when we look at our lives as successful, strong, independent women, it's often devoid of femininity.
Mm-hmm.
And
right.
I feel in some ways, I'm not sure that I know how to be a girl anymore. Because I'm too busy.
That is so beautiful the way you put that, because that's what I was trying to say earlier. They just rediscovered who I was at 8. So I rediscovered who I was as a girl, and to rejoice in that femininity and that girliness, and to see that as a positive. It's beautiful and wonderful, and it makes us feel so good on the inside and outside. And also it's such a great example for women who are still girls, the 8-year-olds in all of our lives. So I think that you're right. I think that is a big challenge of being strong and smart and independent and female, is to still say, you know what, but I'd like high heels, and I like shopping, and I like giggling, and I like going out with the girls.
The pendulum has swung so far the other way that to be strong and successful, we actually have started to judge women and girls for being too girly, that they're not
Right.
strong enough. And so I think
Right.
let's just let women and girls be who they are and find what makes them happy and tick and back off,
Right.
just let them do their thing.
Very well said. Exactly right.
So I really appreciate your time and talking about this.
Well, thank you so much. This is a delight. Thank you so very much.
If you're digging the 40 Thrive podcast, do not forget to subscribe in your favorite podcast app. That way you never have to go searching for it again. But if you're old school, because I know there are a lot of you out there, you can also listen at 40thrive.com/podcast. Just click on the topic you like and press play. Easy breezy. And please consider sharing this with a friend. There are so many women over 40 out there who could use a little camaraderie and community. That's what we are all about here, so don't be shy. Share, share, share. Thanks so much for listening. If you're not already in our private 40 Thrive Facebook group, come on over. We're talking all things life over 40 in there. Until next time, take care and keep thriving.
Spring has sprung, and with the change of seasons, sometimes comes an increase in vitality. If you're feeling in the mood for a little more personal time, may I suggest Coconut. Coconut is all about providing clean and natural ingredients when you're enjoying your most intimate moments, with or without a partner. Naturally safe products developed by people who are obsessed with quality. Get 15% off with promo code GROWNASS at grownasswoman.guide/Coconut. That's 15% off with promo code GROWNASS at grownasswoman.guide/Coconut.